everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. So today we're starting Unit 2 of Economic and Personal Finance on macro and microeconomics. In college, these are two completely separate courses, but we're going to try to hit the high points here today or in this unit on macro and microeconomics. And today we're going to give you kind of some abstract concepts that are going to be very important to understand as we delve into macro and microeconomics and what that even means here in this unit. Let's go ahead and get started. So big picture here as we walk through in the future lessons in this unit on what micro and macroeconomics is. It's about economics. They're two very separate entities of economics, even though on a grand scale they are interconnected. Anyway, macroeconomics is talking about large-scale economies, how countries interact with each other, how entire, trillion-dollar budgets are spent in countries as a whole, taxation and things like that. Microeconomics deals more with individual businesses. Sometimes they're just referred to as firms in economics, like how one firm handles money. Microeconomics is also like how you would do your home budget and things like that. So microeconomics, small scale. Macroeconomics is on a much larger scale. Before we get into that, let's start talking about some very important abstract concepts that you need to know about. So as we talk about some of these abstract concepts, and your brain might be swimming like, what? He's like, there's too many abstract things. Why can't we just talk about like absolute things that are like absolute and guaranteed, like money? Why do we have to talk about these abstract concepts of like market stabilization and stuff like that? How about we just talk about like real world stuff, Mr. Wagstaff, like money, something that's real and is not abstract? Well, there's very little in our society that is more abstract than money, because money is fake. It's not real. What that means is that these actual green pieces of paper right here, all right, don't actually have any intrinsic value. That piece of paper is worth $100, and you know that because you've grown up understanding what money is worth. But in actuality, it's just based on like people's general desire that this is worth $100. Whereas if it just had a 1 on there instead of a 100, it would be worth $1 and be worth less, even though it's the same type of green piece of paper. So money is a lot like Tinkerbell. Whereas if you believe in it, it exists. If you don't believe in it, then it doesn't exist. And then we just live in chaos because our entire society is make-believe. Now, the reason it works, but don't go into panic mode, society and human nature, this is why it's a social studies course, the economics, society all collectively want to believe in money. However, since it's an arbitrary concept, it has inconsistencies because we've all just agreed that we're going to use money to buy things. The inconsistencies are called fluctuations. Fluctuations on how much is money worth on a large scale affects the economy. So today we're going to start talking about wanting to stabilize an economy, because a stable economy is a good economy. A fluctuating economy, not a good economy. So understanding that the entire concept of economics is abstract, all right? Because money is made up, something that we as a society want to use to represent value. I may have already blown your mind. Let's simplify it. All right. So the economy, because it's all make-believe, all right, we need it to be consistent. Since it's not an actual real thing you can touch, how do you regulate it? Well, people want to be confident in the economy. People want the economy to be stable. So what do I mean when I say people want the economy to be stable? Let me give you two very clear examples of stability. This is a 3-year breakdown of Bitcoin, which is cryptocurrency. Now, because Bitcoin is so new and has gone up and down, whenever you're watching this, there could be a whole lot more to the story than I know right now telling us. But this is up until 2023. So in the last 3 years, Bitcoin has gone way up in value. It's gone way down in value. Gone way up in value, way down in value. You might be like, well, Bitcoin isn't real. Is any money real? Is what is value? Is whatever we prescribe to it. However, the fact that Bitcoin will go up and it'll go down, it'll go up and go down, makes it fluctuate. Fluctuation is not good in an economy. The opposite of fluctuation would be like gold prices. This is the same time period pretty much of gold prices where gold is consistent and gradually goes up. People are more likely to want to invest in gold than they will in Bitcoin at this point, mainly because gold is predictable. It is stable. It is very important to have a stable society, a stable economy, because it gives people confidence. When people believe in something like gold and they believe it will continue to be effective, it is, because it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. People are losing faith in Bitcoin, and when people don't believe it has value, it varies wildly. So consistent gains lead to confidence, which then in turn lead to more consistent gains. Almost like the chicken or the egg, which came first? Is it the confidence or is it the consistent stability of the market? They go hand in hand. This is why economics can be difficult. So let's talk about some economic institutions. What are the things that cause these fluctuations in society for good or bad? So economic institutions, things that affect the economy in large part in America. So one of the biggest ones is the central bank. The central bank regulates how banks work in a country. Every country has a central bank. In America, we specifically call our central bank the Federal Reserve, sometimes just called the Fed, and we're going to talk more about that here in a minute. So a central bank, this is basically like run by the government that basically helps regulate other banks. A financial institution, all right, is another example of an economic institution. This would be actual banks like Wells Fargo, BB&T, your local bank where you would deposit your paycheck in. These banks are very important to the economy because they decide who gets loans and who doesn't. That puts more money in the economy, which causes the economy to fluctuate up and down. All right. So those are economic institutions. Another economic institution is less, physical, like an actual building, is a lot of like social concepts and social norms, like tipping. All right. The entire restaurant industry, the wages for the waiters and waitresses is based almost exclusively off tipping. There is no industry for tipping. This is just the expectation that people will tip the waiters and waitresses in restaurants. So social norms and cultures also can be an economic institution because it really affects the entire economy on a smaller scale of a restaurant, depending on how much people tip. You should always tip at least 20% if you're at a sit-down restaurant with a waiter or waitress. Just FYI. All right, so there are policies in place that try to regulate the economic institutions to make sure they don't get wild and crazy. There's things like interest rates, monetary policy, trying to get stability and growth, trying to keep inflation, all right, from getting out of control, because too much inflation makes the money basically worthless. Whole nother set of issues when inflation jumps up. So the question here is, explain what economic stabilization is and why it is important. The economy has to remain calm, cool, and collected, hopefully growing at all times. That is a stable economy. Economic stability leads to confidence in the economy. People, when they have confidence in the economy continues to be stable. It's like a chicken or the egg situation. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Confidence in the economy or a stable economy? Who knows? But they do go hand in hand and they're absolutely correlated. So economic stabilization is very important in society, and there are things like the central bank that help regulate that. So answer that completely, pause me, or moving on. All right. So the government is responsible for implementing what's called fiscal policy. The government is also responsible for a thing called monetary policy. So fiscal, hey, what's fiscal mean? Financial, so it means money. Okay, what's monetary means? Like money, so it means money. Are fiscal policy and monetary policy the same thing? It sounds like it, but they're not. They're very, very different, all right? They do work together. The government in the United States controls both of these. The fiscal policy is the Congress and the president. You've probably talked a lot about this in civics, where they decide how much people are taxed, which is how the government makes money, by taxing people, and then they turn around and use that money to provide goods for society. All right, how much they tax and how much they pay out, which it's all the taxes they pay out, but how much they tax and what they spend that money on, that is fiscal policy. All right, monetary policy. All right. So again, fiscal policy is the use of government spending and tax policies to influence economic conditions, especially macroeconomic conditions. Basically, taxation and what they spend that money on, that is fiscal policy. Monetary policy is how the government actually controls money, meaning that the federal government regulates money in and of itself. Like the monetary policy very much depends on inflation. You always need a little bit of inflation to take place in society, but too much inflation is really bad, and deflation, absolutely the worst possible thing that can happen, because then people can't pay off their debts. So monetary policy is a set of tools that the nation's central bank, the Fed, as in the United States, the Federal Reserve, has available to promote sustained economic growth by controlling the overall supply of money that is available to the nation's banks, its consumers, and businesses. You got that, right? Don't panic. We're getting ready to walk through that, and I'm getting ready to make that make sense. The question here, though, is explain what fiscal and monetary policy are. Here you really need to focus on the fact that the fiscal policy is the government taxing people and then what they want to spend that tax money back on for the greater good of society. Monetary policy is literally the government's policy on how to regulate the money in society. All right? So understand the difference in those two things. We're going to move on and start explaining the monetary policy and the Federal Reserve here in more detail. So pause me. We're moving on. All right. The Federal Reserve. Let me give you a little history lesson on how this works, and we'll try to simplify it, cutting out a whole bunch, but this way it'll make sense. The Federal Reserve was created under Woodrow Wilson in 1912. When the Federal Reserve is created, it is designed to help regulate banks, but it's basically like a government entity that comes out and is like, all right, now we're in charge of banks, which are private industries. Didn't catch on huge at first. I'm oversimplifying so that you can understand this. But the Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States. There is no other central bank. The Federal Reserve System, the Federal Reserve, also called the Fed, is the central bank in the United States. Other countries have some other type of central bank, but in America it's called the Federal Reserve. So in 1912 it came out, all right? It doesn't get a whole lot of power like it does today until the 1930s, when something happened called the Great Depression. In the Great Depression, if you remember from U.S. history, in the Great Depression, banks had been stupid with their money in the 1920s, and they invested all the money in the country into the stock markets, and then the stock market collapsed and everybody's money disappeared, and like Tinkerbell, all the money in America went poof gone. Oversimplification, but the banks lost everybody's money. So people had put money in a bank. That bank had taken other people's money and put it in the stock market without them knowing it, and then lost all their money. So when people went to the bank to get their money out, the bank was closed and it had shut down, and you weren't getting your money back. Basically, the bank had went out of business and you lost all your money and you had done nothing wrong. Needless to say, people were furious about this. So that led to the Great Depression. There was no money. One of the things that had to happen to get society back on the feet is you had to have people trust in the banks again, because the banks are really important with getting people loans and money to get businesses in order to start that whole cycle of making money, spending money again, which is necessary in an economy. But nobody wants to put their money in a bank because the last time that happened, everything disappeared. So the federal government and the Federal Reserve, they come out and they created something called the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation that is controlled by the Fed. All right? Here's what that means. They go to the banks and tell the banks, hey, tell you what, when people put money back in your bank now, all right, if for some reason you lose their money, we, the federal government, will come in and give you that money back. It's basically insurance on any money that gets put in your bank. Now that people realize that they can't lose their money in the bank again, because if something crazy does happen, that the federal government will just give them the money back, this is hooray. It basically puts their money on lockdown in the bank. Now everybody trusts banks again. People start putting their money back into banks. However, the federal government doesn't do this purely because out of the kindness of their hearts. They say in the 1930s, oh, there's a catch to this. If you want us to insure this money, meaning if it all disappears, we will pay it back, and everybody wants that. All the banks desperately want that because that's what gives people faith in the banks to invest money back in their banks. If you want to keep this, you have to do what we say, meaning the Federal Reserve. When we tell you what interest rates need to be, when we tell you how to manage your money, you have to do it. You can't do dumb stuff with people's money anymore either. But you also have to listen to us with the interest rates that we tell you. So the private banks agree to this. To get the insurance on the money, they agree to federal funds rate, which basically means every bank that you've ever seen, all right, is part of the FDIC. So all the money in there is insured. You can't lose your money. But it also makes those banks have to listen to what the federal government tells them to do as far as interest rates go. Interest rates are very important. So interest is like thank you money that you have to pay back a bank if they give you a loan. So if they give you a loan with a 6% interest rate, you have to pay back the loan plus thank you money, which is an interest rate. Now, if the interest rate is really low, people always take money out, all right? Because they don't have to pay, they obviously have to pay back what they take out, but the thank you money isn't really high. If the interest rates go really high, all right, and interest rates go up, people don't want to take out as many loans because by doing so, they have to pay back more. So interest rates, when they go up, people no longer want to take out loans. When interest rates go down, people do want to take out loans. Taking out loans is putting tons of money into the economy. So the Federal Reserve is extremely influential in how much money is in the economy because they control interest rates. If there is too much money in the economy and it's causing too much inflation, the Federal Reserve needs to take some money out of the economy. They don't take it and just burn it. All they do is they increase interest rates. And all the banks have to listen to them, and the banks have to increase interest rates. Means less people will go to the bank and take out a loan, therefore putting less money in the economy. If the economy is struggling and the Federal Reserve needs to put more money into the economy, and all this is the monetary policy. The Federal Reserve decides, do we want to put more money in or more money out? If the Federal Reserve needs to put more money into the economy, they lower interest rates, and then everybody starts taking out loans to buy cars and houses and stuff because it's really cheap to pay it back. The Federal Reserve's monetary policy is based very heavily on the fact that they control the interest rates, and higher interest rates mean they take money out of the economy, slows down inflation, whereas if a society is really struggling to get going, they lower the interest rates, which puts more money into the economy. That is the primary monetary policy of how the Federal Reserve controls the money in society, and how much money is in society is through interest rates on banks. So the question here is, what is the role of the Federal Reserve System when it comes to monetary policy? And again, the monetary policy of the Federal Reserve, oversimplified for this class, they really focus very heavily on interest rates when it comes to loans. So pause me, answer that completely. We're moving on. So other stuff outside of like the Federal Reserve that control economic stability is trade associations, sometimes called industry associations, sometimes called business associations. So an industry association would be a group of companies that are related based on their primary business activities. So what happens is you might have competing companies, right? And here's some actual examples of trade associations, sometimes called business associations, like the National Screen Printers Association. All the screen printers all over the country, all right? They all screen print. They make t-shirts, right? So they all want to make money. However, if they all are super cutthroat with each other, all right, they could put each other out of business and it could cause market fluctuations. People went out of business, people start new businesses. So what they do is all of these people who are, granted, they're in competition with each other, they will still join a trade association. So all the screen printers in the same trade, in this case, the screen printers, they all get together and they basically come up with some general ground rules. They're like, okay, we know it's dog eat dog out there, but how about here's the cheapest that anybody agrees to sell a t-shirt for. If the prices get too high here, then we're going to try to work things out. They do this so that it's not so cutthroat that they put their entire trade out of business. This is beneficial to stability in large part because they help regulate their own prices and profits that they're making to help out everybody in their trade. This can also cause some fluctuations. Say it's like the Ductile Iron Society. Let's not use a real one here. We'll talk way back in the 1800s with the steel industry. If it's a monopoly or it's a small group of people like in the steel industry that all agree, hey, there is no other competition. How about we all jack up our prices on our own? That can cause market fluctuations. While trade associations and business associations are really good at stabilizing the economy and at keeping it consistent, there can be the issue arises to where, and this is not uncommon, that trade associations and business associations are much more concerned with their own personal success and making a profit than they are, obviously, the betterment of society, and they could make prices so high it's unaffordable. But generally speaking, they do provide a stability, even if it can feel like an unfair stability. Trade associations do provide considerable stability in the economy. So how do business organizations play a role in economic stabilization? So pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. All right, so all the stabilizations is trying to stop economic fluctuations, all right? Stabilization means even keel. Fluctuations means up and down. So economies, regardless of how much we try to make them stable, they're going to have fluctuations and up and down. You just want them to be smooth and gradual and not common and not a sneak attack, all right? So the economy, there are very different time periods of an economy. So the best the economy is going to be is called the peak, all right? And so these are the different fluctuations. It's the peak. The scary thing about a peak is you don't know when you're at the peak. It's like being on a roller coaster, but you're blindfolded. So you don't know when you're at the top of the click, 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 click. You don't know you're at the peak until the economy starts going down. People start losing faith in the economy. There's less money. The wages go down. Jobs are, and we'll talk all about this more in macroeconomics. But so you have the peak, and then you have a recession, which means the economy goes down. Recessions are bad, all right? At the absolute bottom is the opposite of a peak. That's the trough, right? Then when the economy starts getting better again, that's called a recovery. These are four very distinct parts of fluctuation. Stabilization is extra. Everybody would just love to stay at the peak at all times. Would love to. That usually doesn't happen. But the attempt to stay at the peak and limit these fluctuations is called economic stabilization. It is better for the economy to not have these fluctuations. So while these fluctuations are kind of mandated and they're going to be required and it's going to happen, the entire point of economic stabilization is to prevent it from happening. as much as you can. So the question here is, why is it important to have economic stabilization in the United States? A stable economy leads to confidence in the economy. People believe in it and it does well. All right? An economy that fluctuates all the time leads to a lack of confidence and the economy doesn't do well. It's kind of like the chicken or the egg. But it's important to have an economic stabilization in the United States. It's important because a stable economy is a strong economy, and a strong economy leads to a stronger economy. All right, so answer that completely. That's as far as we're going to get today. See you guys tomorrow.